Well, hi everyone. Caught us in the middle of a giggle, and so happy to be here today with all of you. Please share where you're from if you're new or anything of interest that you feel we should hear. Love to relate everything to priorities you may have, so let us know. That's what we're here for. And chat's wide open, so feel free. Today's word of the day is service, and I know we're all paying service to something. The key is what and how good is it serving us? And others. So with that, because of the rotation, I'll start with Catherine today. Always great to have you, Catherine. If you don't know Catherine, Dave, or Charles, please give yourself an opportunity by visiting their profiles on LinkedIn. Charles has a fabulous live stream 12 hours before this one. And if you're on the West Coast, it's a lot easier. And if you're not, you can always catch it via a recording. So the same link that gets you in will allow you to watch it later. So, Catherine, what's new and how do you look at service today?
Well, thanks, Don. It's always so fun to be here with you, gentlemen, and I look forward to it every time. I think it's important when we think of service is what's the intention,
Hmm.
right? And how are we moving forward with it? Um, I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, kind of tongue in cheek about so much of customer service these days is do it yourself, the DIY customer service, and it's just like I don't think that's service, right? And so when you go into service with wanting to be solutions oriented and to help lift other people up and to do some of these things that really are in a collaborative mode, it makes such a difference. And I think that it comes back to intention. What is it that you're working to accomplish?
Wonderful start, Catherine. Dave?
Yeah, it's hard to follow up on that one because intention is, I think we've said that word several times over the last couple of sessions. It's a very important aspect of it. But I'll take a little different. When I think of service, I think of three things: service to mission, whatever job it is that you're doing, whether it's personal or professional; service to self, what are you doing to help yourself and do for improving yourself and what you can do and what you can bring to the world and to yourself; and then to others. What is it that you can do to lift others? They play out differently in work, professional, with our lives, and in business. It just there's three levels to it. Is my main point.
Yeah, definitely. Charles?
Yeah, I think that service, instead of asking yourself what you can get from a particular situation, I think the question we should be asking ourselves is what can we give to a situation? And the secret to living is giving. And it's one of the most famous mantras is gratitude. We're hearing a lot about gratitude, and I think that it ties right into the whole concept of service and being of service to others. For most of my life, I've had a strategy and of short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And as I enter the later aspects of my career, as opposed to early career, I've been reflecting on, well, does that change now? Does that change now? Do I now start looking at immediate gain because the long-term strategy is not as long as it was at the beginning of my career? But I think no, it doesn't. It's always stays the same, that the short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And for me, the short-term sacrifice was being of service to people. I've looked a lot into the concept of the 5 love languages, and one of my love languages, or my number one dominant love language, is service and being of service to others. And that's just who I am as part of my DNA.
Excellent. Great way to get a foundation. And we've got our first wonderful person. It's Omar. And Omar is a significant player on LinkedIn, especially on live stream. I've been admiring Omar's use of shorts for his live stream. And I can see it's getting really good views. And Omar is really focused on his YouTube strategy. So applause to him. And when I look at service, I look at the pleasure of being of service. I think a lot of people look at service as something they do and they get something for it, or they have to do it to get something for it, and it looks almost unequal, where I look at it like it's a privilege to serve someone, especially if you've been served, right? If you're done eating, it's a privilege to say, here's so much more food we haven't eaten, or enjoy yourself, and then enjoy them enjoying themselves. And I think if everybody looks at service as a benefit as opposed to a responsibility or an obligation, I think it can serve all of Dave's three portions. Because by serving others, if you get joy out of it, then you're serving yourself, and you're also modeling and duplicating, hopefully, your efforts through others. And you would like to think that the world's a little bit better place in some way for something you've done in some way every day. And it could be a small thing, like we talk about a smile, passing somebody in the park. It could be a compliment that no one really gives, but is deserving. So there's many ways that you can integrate that into your daily routine and not feel like I got to take 2 days off and build a house for someone, right? Because those are far and few between. Charles has some comments. Ask yourself, how can I give? How can I serve? Yeah, and that will give you balance. Because instead of thinking what you're not getting and who's not doing something for you, why don't you do something for someone else, and you'll forget about yourself, And I think that's a great positive redirection and positive distraction. Also, how can I give? How can I serve? We're emphasizing that twice today. Catherine, your turn.
Well, I think this is all really wonderful, because I think that in order to really be able to give, we have to be whole. We have to take care of ourselves first, because people that are spent are looking to get, right? And I think that it's important for to recognize that we do have an obligation to serve ourselves first. That age-old, example of put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because if you're not in good shape yourself, you're not going to be smiling to spread that smile. You're not going to be giving with an open heart intention to give and to serve. And I think that it's really important, because in so many areas, we haven't been, it hasn't been modeled to us. We haven't been taught, we haven't been programmed for really efficient or complete self-care. And I think that there are so many elements along with that. It's not the commercialized version of self-care. It's like, what am I doing to make myself healthy? What am I doing to, raise my vibration, to be in the heart-brain coherence, and to have that open heart, and to be able to give with no expectation of really anything coming back in return.
Yeah, that's a wonderful definition or explanation. And it really breaks it down into ways people can achieve different perspectives that can justify it, I suppose. Dave?
I think that's a brilliant explanation, Catherine. I think it's very important that, as I went through my 20-year career in the Navy, I watched and I was modeled by so many leaders who sacrificed their own well-being, the mission first, instead of the 3 tiers of, hey, we've got to take care of ourselves, to take care of others, to take care of the mission. We forget, we say the mission is first. And we forgot about that. We didn't take care of ourselves very often. And, we pay for it later with, bad bones, bad muscles, bad brains, whatever. Not necessarily bad attitudes, but we definitely pay for it if we don't take care of ourselves first. And we have to look at it as a tiered, there's always, in the military, we say mission first, people always, but we seem to forget about the people always.
Right.
And that's a big problem. Something I was thinking about after my first introduction is something, I just get a little off tangent here, maybe a little bit, is I've always struggled with people saying, thank you for your service to me. And it was very hard for me because I had too much fun on one hand. Yes, I beat myself up. I didn't take care of myself, to Catherine's point. But if you're having a good time, is it really something you're sacrificing? It wasn't a sacrifice for me to do what I did. And I didn't go into the military whole. I did it because I didn't want to grow up for the most part. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a strategy. I just said, I'm going to go and do this. And it was kind of structured for me. But in the end, I found a lot of blessings from it because I found that I was doing for others at the same time and having impact on future generations. And it came back, again, another quick tangent. I was listening to a podcast during my run this morning. And one of the questions was, what's your legacy that you've left behind? And I had to think, well, I had an impact on a few sailors, and one in particular who called me 14 years after I worked with him in Iraq. He said, Dave, I'm getting married and I really want you to be there. And I said, well, okay, I will make every effort to be there. Well, I didn't realize that he had told everybody I was coming. And everybody at this wedding who I knew only him, I didn't know his bride. And that's the impact that I had was service, what I did for him, he repaid to me in the future 15 years later, and it was very impactful. So a little tangent, just a quick story that I wanted to share.
No, that's wonderful. And I think the more we can personalize whatever we're saying, it's easier to relate to in the audience because everybody's got somewhat of an experience. And a lot of times it will come to the surface. Charles had a wonderful suggestion is maybe we can offer what we're doing personally and professionally to be of service. And, I'll move to Charles first because it's his next turn.
You want me to answer that question?
Sure.
Well, actually, I'll answer that question on the next round.
Okay.
I want to tell a bit of a story here about when I was running my business, and when you actually, I think we focused a lot on service in terms of how we can be of service as humans to other individuals. But I want to talk for a moment about service professionally. And as I was running my business, I used to really take care of my customers like many business people do. And I'm sure, all of you three would in business settings. And I know we've heard a little bit about your business background, Donald, and I'm sure you looked after your customers extremely well. And I was the same way with my business. And I am now as an executive coach, or like to think I'm trying to be. But there were times when, of course, obviously customers get upset and you have to deal with upset customers and interact with them and get them to a better place. Now, sometimes my team or people who were watching what was happening, if we had an upset customer, sometimes people on the outside would look at what was happening and they would say, oh, well, that customer is really ungrateful, or they're expecting too much, they're taking advantage of you, and so on. Now, then we sort of flip around to the other side to a situation where I was a customer. And I remember there was one customer I was really frustrated with numerous times. And he used to get quite upset with me, and I struggled to handle those difficult conversations with him at times. But when I was going to university, I lived on a property that had a bit of a lane, and the lane had about maybe 100 feet. And one day I arrived at that property on a Sunday night after visiting my parents in Toronto, and the lane had not been plowed. And it was freezing cold, like minus 40 Celsius, which is also minus 40 Fahrenheit, where the two temperatures merge. And I was there at about 11:30 midnight trying to dig my car halfway through the lane out of the snow. And the individual that was responsible for clearing the lane and shoveling the lane I was just so angry at him for not having done it, because here I was stuck shoveling snow and my car was in a rut, and that meant that it was going to be out in the freezing cold overnight with problems starting. I'd be late for class the next morning. And all of a sudden I stopped and I thought to myself, the frustration I'm feeling is the frustration that not those customers, but one or two of my customers feel when I let them down. And it was a really transformational moment for myself, because I absolutely stopped myself and really allowed myself to dwell in that feeling of a failure of customer service. It also gave me appreciation for what might have happened, because the circumstances of why we didn't deliver for a particular customer were most of the times quite unique, and there was an explanation why something had happened and we'd fallen short. And I thought, probably something's happened with the guy who's supposed to be plowing the lane, and maybe he's got a family emergency, and something's prevented him from being able to come out this weekend and plow the lane. So I'll never forget that. It was just, there it was in the middle of the night, snow all around me, my fog lights on my little Honda Civic, lighting the place up in yellow. And I'll never forget that image. And I had this really transformational moment where I went from being angry to really understanding, well, this is how people feel when you let them down, and when you're not of service. They get overtaken with anger. So I wanted to share that little anecdote with people. Another thing is that the level of service in Asia is absolutely over the top compared to almost anywhere else that I've traveled in Europe, or in, let me call it, continental North America, Canada, and the United States. The service is absolutely over the top in Asia.
Yeah, you tee it off really well for me, since I was in sales and customer service. And I started with a car loan on a Buick, and it was me, Ann, and our dog, and that was it. And worked 7 days a week for months. But that was what we were hoping for. And when a customer would come in after the sale, I would ask for their empty box. And they would always wonder, what do you need? Oh, I'll just take care. If you don't need it, I'll just take care of it for you. And I'd end up putting it on display, and people would think there's 2 items now. And it was that need for customers, and that appreciation for anybody who would spend money, because we needed cash flow, that whatever the customer said, I was okay with. Because at the end of the day, it's not a customer, it's a person. And even a bad customer talks to friends and family. And to Charles's point, you never know what they're going through. And my easiest, fastest solution was, what's it going to take to make you happy? Right? And that way it's not a negotiation. And in almost every case, okay, let's do it. Right? And since they stated it and I provided it, it shouldn't be, well, can we do a little bit better? And the other thing I did was, after the sale, I would always give good customers something special. So if they bought an air compressor, I'd say, well, here's 25 foot of hose or some fittings. And it was after the sale, because they knew I didn't have to do it, but I knew it meant something. And that allowed them to turn other people on. And ultimately, I went to all my suppliers and I said, here's the customer service I'm going to provide for your brand. I want you to back me up, right? So if someone has a problem, I take care of it and you take care of me. And then it made it easier on my whole customer service staff to say, what are you arguing with? Just take it back. And most of the time we'd say destroy and field, which would be, we don't want it back, right? If you're going to send us a vise that costs $30, it's going to be $40 to ship, it's better off not to do it. So a lot of times it's just responsibility and accountability and modeling, right? If I tell you it's okay, it's easier on your job, just whatever they want. And some people would always, it's not fair, they're taking advantage of us. Some people didn't even buy the stuff from us. One guy actually bought a DeWalt drill set and sent it back for return with rocks in it. and wanted a refund. And anyways, I can go on and on, but professionally, I think doing the right thing fast. And I told everybody, if you're going to do it fast and do it with a smile. Nobody wants to hear you don't deserve it, but we're going to give it to you anyways, you know? And eventually you'll find that people are usually looking for a fight and they're surprised when they don't get one.
Right.
They show up ready with all their documentation and everything. And it's like, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It happens. And I think companies like Costco show the same thing in most cases, where they put the customer first. And that makes a difference. And people like to feel like they're respected. And I think part of service, almost every part of service, is respect, right? Whether you're in the military, whether you're in business, people like to feel respected. And that's part of serving people. So moving on to Catherine.
Well, you were laughing. I was laughing as you were talking about you would tell someone to destroy it in the field. I got a big box from Amazon one day, and it was the base of a big floor jack, and it weighed about 40 pounds, and it was supposed to go to some fellow who had a mechanic shop in New Jersey. And so I got in touch with Amazon, and they said, "Oh, just keep it. We'll send him another one." And I said, "Well, what am I supposed to do with this?" Right? So I was laughing about that, and I thought, "Well, what am I going to do with this?" And I ended up dragging it downstairs, getting in a cab, and I took it down to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen because they have a school for tradespeople. And so I was like, well, okay, somebody there is going to be able to use this thing. But it wasn't much customer service because it cost me to get it there, right?
Well, you continued the chain, and I think that's important. And it was innovative. Most people would put it out in the trash or, make a flower pot out of it or something.
Yeah. But I do think that customer service, I was thinking about, being in the medical field, it's a customer service operation. And it's important for people to realize that. And I think sometimes people do forget that. And many times they are difficult customers because they don't feel well. Mm-hmm. And so in order to make that all work, I believe that you have to be that open-hearted. You have to go the extra mile and do a little something extra for people to enroll them in feeling a little more comfortable, so the communication is easier. So because many of these conversations are not easy at all, and if you can establish a rapport with someone, I think it makes it tremendously easier. And I also think that by being empathetic, that people feel heard. And when people don't feel heard, there's no solution.
Yeah, you're so right on all those points. And I think it's valuable to appreciate that. We've got Leslie here. Leslie's everywhere. I was mentioning Leslie. I saw you on Charles's show. And I see you through your carousel that continues to grow and expand, and I'm happy to be part of it. And definitely going to have Leslie back. I was mentioning to Catherine that I saw you had Catherine on. So, Leslie is of supreme service to so many people. I see her lovely grandkids and kids that she promotes all the time. And one of the biggest hearted, good people on LinkedIn. So always a pleasure and a privilege to have you on and to have you participate, and look forward to doing more things together. We've got Lisa here. Hi, Lisa. I see you've got a carousel post too, because I've been noticing your name and we're getting a lot of exposure. Charles is on the carousel also. And I see you're from Tobago. So that's an interesting place to be from. So thank you, Lisa. And Leslie was fast to respond. Being heart-centered like you are now would relieve a lot of anxiety for many of us. And you're so true, because, people don't hear your words, they hear your music. this is why I acknowledge everyone in my lives, and you should. It's something to be grateful is, living vicariously and serving others through the people that you're serving. Like my daughter is always doing stuff. She was PTA president for 3 years. She started the food pantry. Now she's headed a marching band group because our granddaughter's in high school. She volunteers at the pet place. She's got a full-time position in cybersecurity. She's got a couple side hustles. And, it's just doing more and more stuff with more and more people in a real positive way. And I think that's so key. The other thing to feed off of what Charles said, what I found early on when I had irate customers is the louder they spoke, the softer I spoke, and eventually they started speaking softer, right? And when they knew there was not going to be any conflict here, that from the beginning, if I can help you, I'm going to do everything I can, right? And that's how it worked. And we've got Joanne here. Thank you, Joe. Oh, I saw from Charles's show. I actually saw Joanne the other week, reached out, connected, and they actually invited her to visit the show and hopefully one day be a guest on the show. So thank you, Joanne. And I think that's how service works, not only through you, but through others like Leslie, like Joanne, like Charles. And, when everybody wins together, everybody continues to be able to win, right? So people, and that's a call to action for those who are sitting in the shadows at the back of the room to announce yourself, right? You don't want to be in the witness protection program in LinkedIn. You know what I mean? You want to get out there. So thank you, Joanne. Good morning from the Pacific Northwest. Thank you. Can't thank you enough. Okay, so where did I leave off? I think with Catherine. So it must be Dave. Dave.
It must be. Yep. Happy days. I think I'm going to try to take this back a little bit. I mean, we've related the last couple of weeks with social media last week, technology the prior week, and through that we also discussed how because of technology and social media, we have a lack of understanding of human nature, connection. So I think when we talk about service, we need to get away from the technology a little bit and get back to human nature and connection. And because we've gotten so attached to these technological pieces in our lives, we don't think about the interaction. Personally, I think it's great if you want to go through a self-service line. Self-service, you're just doing it for yourself. Okay, great. But I really do enjoy going through, and it's not because I don't pay myself to go through the self-service line. I like to talk to the cash register, the cashier, the bagger. It's a human connection. Talk to them. How's your day going? Are you almost done with your day? Okay, well, it's almost done. You'll be happy. You can go do what you want. So we've lost a little bit in there that we think that technology will solve it, but we've lost the human connection, and that service to others and being able to help can be lost. And that's really my big point. I think if we tie it back to what we've talked about the last 3 weeks, service is lost if we rely on technology too much.
I think that's so true. Charles?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with that. It comes down back to what we've said so much, and that is the human connection and how we are, listening to people, empathizing with people, and creating that customer service experience or serving others. So I asked the question, and how are we of service to others both personally and professionally? So I think so I'll answer that question now that I've shared about my customer service transformation story while shoveling snow in university. I think personally I'm of service as a husband and as a father, service to my wife, and we have talked a lot about what our love languages are, and try to live our relationship through that. We've also talked a lot about that with our kids, so we understand the different types of love languages that our kids have. I'm also at service through church, and I'm involved in the mentoring program there. I'm involved in 3 different mentoring programs in Hong Kong, actually. And I'm at service through that. Now, professionally, I'm at service as an executive and leadership coach. And the area, while I get great satisfaction out of being of service personally, one of the things that's exciting me the most about being an executive and leadership coach is how AI is impacting the level of service. And I think I may have shared before how I use AI in my executive coaching. And that has allowed me, the type of AI I'm using, which is within a sandbox, so it's data privacy protected. So the customers don't need to worry in case they're listening, but they all know that, and they all consent to the use of AI. But what it does is it's very difficult to explain from a cognitive perspective, but it takes the cognitive load off of us as a coach and a client, and allows us to focus on the individual as a client. And then we can go back and study the client through AI, because the AI is a content aggregator. So what happens over 4, 5, 6, 7 sessions, we're able to ask questions about the client that 50 note takers in one room would not be able to answer. It would just be the human cost of that would be huge, whereas AI can do it in literally under 30 seconds. And that has taken coaching to a whole new level of service, which is just astounding for me. And I think if I look at bold beliefs, one bold belief would be that coaching was for solving problems, which I think has really changed a lot these days. And now most companies and most individuals relate to it as a way to sharpen their saw. But the other thing now that we're seeing in the coaching industry is a great resistance to AI. And yet I'm finding that the way I'm using AI is allowing me to be of much better service to my clients professionally than I ever expected possible. And still learning every single day about things that can be done.
Yeah, I second that, because I have fully embraced AI because it works and it has the knowledge and access to information I don't. So it's always going to be my style and my direction, but I'm always going to open myself to the service that AI brings. And all these companies, I heard today the top 3 AI companies, mainly semiconductors, are going to invest $1.5 trillion in the next 3 years into expanding business development. They're going to have, I forgot who it was, Microsoft or some big company, is creating an energy farm just for themselves that will create more energy than all of India does. And that's where nuclear is starting to come in, right? Because now they can power these things directly with smaller nuclear reactors. So it's a chain that continues to expand. The money is flying, and people's lives will improve who jump on the train, and won't improve who get in front of the train. The ones who stand by will be able to see how things develop. But I think everything is going to be how it used to be, and now how it is with AI. And even IBM commercials I see, it's all about integrating AI in your business, right? So before it was like, let's get you a system, or let's get you a better machine. And now let's get you a better way of doing what you're doing by allowing AI to come in, which naturally is going to remove a lot of positions, but also open up newer positions of higher value for those who want to do that. So, service to me, again, if you look at it, is, when you pet an animal, you're serving that animal, right? It doesn't have to have person to person. When you pick up some trash right in front of something and put it in the trash bin, you're of service. It's anonymous, it's unknown. No one will ever tell you, boy, that was a good thing, but it's an awareness. that I could do a little bit more here with that, with her, with him, and you enjoy it, as opposed to I just walked by the person, didn't do anything. I just walked by the trash and made like I didn't see it, you know? And that's where I think the challenge comes, is more involvement, and things like Zoom and this program gets an audience thinking, gets us creating and improving. Because eventually you start to think, well, if Charles is doing AI and Don's in AI and they love it and they're also high integrity people, maybe I should move a little closer or get in touch with Charles or Don and see what we can do together.
Mhm.
You know, the opportunities have never been greater. The risk has never been greater. And change is so vital to service. So until I get on my soapbox, we'll get back to Leslie. My son learned to deal with difficult customers by having me as a mother. I can believe he gets quieter when another gets louder. But you do have more than enough compensating and redeeming features, Leslie. Omar says, good points, Charles. We can do what we can, but we can't satisfy all people. See, customer service is a hard job. It needs lots of patience. Most jobs out there are customer service jobs, whether you're an engineer, nurse,
Mhm.
or I'll finish it here, and that's where it left. So, okay, great. Now that I've lost my place, one more, Leslie. It's scary stuff to me. It's only scary until it isn't. So who am I going to now? I believe it's Dave, Catherine, or Charles. Dave.
I thought it was Catherine.
Catherine. Is it Catherine?
Yeah.
I'll start.
I don't know, I lost track myself. I've been having so much fun listening to this conversation. Right. I loved what you said about raising awareness, because I think it sometimes it's easy to be in our little path, our little, lane here, and we kind of lose track sometimes. But I do think awareness is a huge part of it. And how can we each be a conscious contributor? And I think that that's a fabulous question to ask ourselves. I know in answering Charles' question, over the years, I have taught myself to do a much better job of taking care of myself. Because I understand what you're talking about, Dave, and I've experienced a lot of broken bones and a lot of different things, right? And that's all resistance, right? And so now at my tender young age, I'm finally getting the hang of it. And so and it makes a big difference. I also think that how I serve others, I think about the thousands of people that I have worked with, through the nursing and the coaching, and it's a small percentage of people that actually understand the basics of how they operate and how the body-mind energy connection really works. And so I'm on a mission to change that. And I think when people can understand the basics of the mechanics of their energetics, along with all of the other aspects of how they're put together, I think that they have a much better chance of being fulfilled, of being able to support themselves moving forward, because we all are always moving into the unknown. And I think that on some levels, AI is a bit scary. On the other hand, it's like we're all part of it. And if we don't learn to use it, we're going to be left behind.
Okay, I believe it, and I believe your vibration does make a difference in projecting onto others. Charles has what you do has far greater impact than what you say, Stephen Covey, and it's probably remembered a lot longer too. And Charles has one that says, "Candle loses nothing by lighting another candle." James Keller. So well put. Very illustrative. Dave.
Yeah, I was just thinking I would answer Charles's question. How are we, each of us of service professionally, personally to others? it's been Don and I had this conversation yesterday. He's a great service to me. He reached out, he saw that I had some change in personality, some change in perspective over the course of the last 2 years of knowing him. And it occurred to me that, this year I haven't focused on a professional side personally, but I have helped others through their professional and personal guidelines. I've mentored, and it's not even a professional coaching business. It's not even somebody I know very well. Friends have reached out and said, hey, I've got nephews, I've got friends who are thinking about intelligence community. They're thinking about private investigations, or they're having mental health issues. Could you help them? And that to me is the most rewarding piece. And Don, to your credit, you reminded me that was my passion 2 years ago, of helping veterans in particular with mental health issues. And just watching the growth of a couple of mentors or mentees of mine and their professional growth has been more rewarding to me than any professional business opportunity I could have had this year. It has helped keep me focused. So to answer your question, Charles, nothing professionally per se for me this year, but personally, I have gotten a lot out of helping others through their growth of what they want to do with their lives.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. And, I think that's important, is awareness and perspective, right? We've got Jagrati. I know I've seen you before. So happy you were able to join us today. People should focus on how they feel, not what they feel. I think that's important. They say there's a brain in your heart that's more valuable than the brain in your head.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a lot to it, but not enough time to go into it right now. So we'll move to Charles, but thank you for coming today.
Yeah, I want to also distinguish the difference between service versus helping. Helping often comes from a place where we might see people or see someone as broken, and that can disempower them. Whereas service comes from seeing people as whole and capable and complete, and really taking a stand for them as a possibility, and looking and identifying the potential in that individual. And you can take the same individual and you could look at the situation that you're helping them, or you can look at the situation that you're serving them. And their side doesn't change, but our perspective does change, because we're just the way we look at them. Are we being of service, or are we having on our side, are we having a broken perspective where we're helping them? And I would advocate that the service side is a more empowered, grateful type of service. Mother Teresa said that when we serve others, we often think that it doesn't make a difference, that it's only a drop in the ocean. And yet without that drop, the ocean is less.
Yeah, that's another great saying. You always have that knack for picking up these great sayings that can relate directly to what we're talking about. So thank you, Charles. And, I think the other key element of service is not being of judgment, right? If you can reserve judgment, because no one wants to know if they're right or wrong. Most people feel bad enough already without having to be told something like that, especially prematurely. And the other thing is getting away from transactional. How many times is like, well, I did my 50, now you put your 50 in, right? And you can take forever and maybe it never gets done. And I'm like, do all you can. What I can do, I'll fill in the blanks and be happy to do that. So if it's 80-20, 90-10, and plus if you can do things better, faster, easier, why put somebody through it, right? Just get it done, or say, here's the little things I need. And what comes around goes around. The other thing is attitude and projection. There are times, especially, I had a big, fast-growing business. There are times that it was way beyond what I could do. And there are days I didn't wake up 100%. But, there were so many times I'd be driving to work, and I said, I'm not right for work. And I'd see a park, and I'd start walking. And I'd keep walking until I was right again. Then I get in the car, and when I show up for work, I was ready to go.
Yeah.
because I brought the best me I could every day for the people there. You know, they said, Napoleon was the 10,000 man general because when he showed up on the battlefield, his effect on his troops was as good as 10,000 more troops. And the worst thing you can do that can be very depressing is go into the general's tent and see him crying in his hands, right? and thinking that's motivating. So, you got to check yourself at the door.
Mhm.
You can project really good things and you can pick up the vibration. They say people are like elevator buttons, right? Some take you up and some take you down. And some people don't even know they're taking you down. That's just their normal way of sharing every problem they have,
Mhm.
assuming it might go away instead of creating more than they wanted to. So, Catherine?
Well, I think it's so interesting about getting yourself right before you go to work, which brings me back to the self-care issue and starting off with a morning practice to make sure that you're, pretty solid before you start out, because then you're in a position to be able to be of service to people. And I liked what you were bringing up too, Charles, in regard to helping versus being of service, because I think sometimes in the helping arena, it's more of a codependent arena, right? And when we're of service, I always think of it as I want people to have the information. I want them to have the skills. I want them to have, the tools that they can use to be as independent as possible so they can be singing their beautiful song, right? Because their song is way different than mine, probably. And I think that's the good thing. And I think that I don't know why AI just popped into my head, but I think that AI is pretty interesting because I use it to gain different perspectives on things. What do you think about XYZ? Because we all work in our own 360 and sometimes we get stuck on our perspective. But if I look over here, it's just like, oh my gosh, there's a whole new arena of information to consider. It's just like, might change my mind on that, right? And so I think it's important to be open and be open to what it is the other person can actually use instead of forcing something down their throat that you think that maybe they would benefit from.
Yeah, I think you make great points. And I think it brings a big point up is you got to trust yourself to trust yourself, right? So with that, Dave?
I will be quite honest. I don't know that I have too much more to add here. I agree with Catherine, right from the start where we said intention, but being whole. I think many of us go into service thinking it will heal us, but we need to be healed before we go into service sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Every day is a new day, right? And what you do with today will have a lot of determination on what you do tomorrow, right? And I think once you get to the point where you're happy without getting anything more, and part of that reason I believe is I feel sometimes I'm like in a relay race and I'm passing the baton, right? I had my race. I want other people to live the kind of life I was fortunate to have lived, and that gives me satisfaction. Charles has the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service of others, Mahatma Gandhi. And I'll move to Charles.
I love what you said, Dave, and about how we feel about ourselves. And I remember at the very beginning of my career, I worked for a training organization that ran a suite of different types of leadership, management, customer service, sales training programs that were all quite. They were the good programs of the day. And one day, the customer that we were supposed to be delivering a customer service training program to a customer service team of about 15 to 20 people. and something happened that the trainer didn't show up. And this was not a trainer that we usually regularly dealt with. It was someone that was contracted to us, and they were flying in, and at the last minute they found out that this person wasn't coming. And the director was really, really uncomfortable with how to handle the situation. And no one had ever seen the manual before. And I had only been with the company for about a year, but at that point they had trained me to run leadership, supervisory, and sales training programs. And so I said, okay, give me the manual, let me have a look at it. And literally on the way over in the car, I looked through the manual, and I said, how long is the training? He says, it's supposed to be 1 hour. And I said, no problem, I got it. And I went in there and I talked to them for 1 hour. Well, it was an interactive thing because I said, okay, how are you feeling? And the reason I said, how are you feeling? And by this point, I've been running my company for about 9 or 10 years. And that summer, I had another person, kind of a GM, running my company for me. And I went off and worked for this training company. And I went in there for 1 hour and 90 minutes. And I talked to the sales team. I said, this is what so few people understand about customer service. It starts with self-esteem, which is exactly your point, Dave. How are you feeling today? And what can we do to help you pull up your self-esteem? And the whole 90 minutes was all about that, and how much self-esteem impacted customer service and being of service to others. And it was the funniest thing, because as we were driving away, he said, well, you just made lemonade out of lemons. And it turned out to work out really, really well. But it was an amazing experience for me because it really gave me a foundation in understanding how important what you just said, Dave, is, how we're feeling impacts how we serve others.
Yeah.
Put on your own oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
As Catherine said.
Well, and I think ultimately is what works best is what works next, right? So it's not about authorship. It's about practicality and being pragmatic. And a lot of times it's choosing between the best of two bads. Is let's do what we can with what we have until we can get better. And it's really being proactive. It's motion. Because they say winning is 90% just showing up every day. Because eventually you'll figure it out if you keep showing up every day, and people will see you as the person who shows up every day. So you could create your own attraction by doing things for others. It's the people who get there early, stay late, and love being there, not the ones who are looking good. And also are you helping somebody be better so they can think clearer? You go to some companies, everybody's in fear, everybody's intimidated, everybody's hiding, everybody's pretending, right? And everybody knows it. And how unproductive and unrewarding something like that is. So you also have to look at your environment, your culture. Who are you with, right? You never saw a jockey carry a horse across the finish line, right? And that's what a lot of people try to do, is take on too much with too little too fast, and then get disappointed when they should have been expecting it. And the other thing is it feels better to smile than to frown. It's always refreshing to have laughter in your day, no matter what you're laughing at, with people who like to laugh too. So I think a lot of it is positioning. Is get yourself in the right place with the right people, doing the right things. And you have no choice but to be part of the 5 people you spend the most time with. We've got Omar, who has a question for all. What is a good habit someone can do to not start their day looking or using your phone in the morning? Opinions? Well, my opinion is, unless it's time sensitive, who cares? Someone gets a text and they're talking with you, and all of a sudden they got to respond to the text. And the text is not about anything that needs to be done right now. It can be done in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or batch it. And some people, send me things. Didn't you get my text? I haven't looked at my phone in 3 hours. I didn't know it was coming, right? And when you look at it, it was nothing that was of urgency, but because people feel they act that way, they assume everybody else is real-time communication, and they're sacrificing that person to person around them. Or even when people are looking at their phone during lunch, they don't even have to be talking about it. You know, it kind of shows I'm kind of bored with what you're saying, and I'm kind of curious about what they may be saying, and it just doesn't kind of fit the way it should. Catherine.
Well, I might get in trouble for telling this story, but it's funny you were talking about people laughing and humor, and I think I love humor. I think life is supposed to be fun. But an example of what what we're all talking about, I think, oh gosh, this was a long time ago. And I had taken my kids to run some errands in Rochester, New York. And I think Kels was maybe 5, and so Michael would have been 8. And Michael was going to be joining in on the tennis team. And so we go to the sporting goods store, and they're actually having a sale. But I don't know all the parts and pieces, and I can't find anyone to help me. Right. And so I'm about like, well, okay, we're going to have to go someplace else because they don't even have a whole racket put together. And this kid comes up, and he's got this shiny big face and a big smile, and his name is Chris on his name tag. And he says, "What can I do to help you?" And I don't think that he knew any more about the parts and pieces than I did, but we picked out parts and pieces to put this racket together. And it was a fun experience. So we get to the checkout line, and the gal at the counter was really cranky. And she said, "You're going to have to come and pick this up in 2 days." I said, "I don't live close to here. I'd like to have it sent to me, please." And she said, "Well, we only do corporate shipping." And I said, "Oh, that works. I have a corporate, FedEx. I'll give you my number." She said, "We only do corporate shipping." I said, "But I can give you the number. I have this corporate account." She said, "Lady, you're not getting it." She said, "We only do corporate shipping." And I said, "Oh, okay. I'm beginning to get it. You only ship from Big Dick to Big Dick." And so it was like, and of course my kids are mortified, right? And they're like, "Oh my gosh, here she goes again." But it's a funny story, and it's kind of the epitome of so many different levels of what we're all talking about. And so I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. We're not getting the racket today.
Well, and that just shows you how situations stick with you.
Yeah.
Right? And it either teaches you or doesn't. But life is unusual to begin with.
I know,
Then
right?
when you get all the people into the soup, it gets even more interesting. And what I learned is when you can change frustration with fascination, everything gets a lot better.
Mhm.
Where you can reflect, how did this happen, or why am I involved? And the last thing I'll say before the next last thing I say is I forgot. And I'm honest, Dave.
Well, I know we're coming up on the top here, and I'll answer Omar's question with my own perspective on how do we start our day without looking at these abysmal telephones that we call phones, which are really computers in our pocket that we can talk on. My first example is a great friend of mine, and I have yet to follow this rule, and I really, maybe now I should start, is why is your phone in your bedroom at all? So many of us use it as an alarm clock. Well, I was reminded when I was unpacking a couple of boxes that I hadn't seen in a while, and I found one of my old digital alarm clocks. So why don't I set that up, and I don't have to use my phone? So if I don't have the phone there, you don't think about it, and therefore you can start your day without using it. And then I think Catherine would agree, is start your day with a couple of deep breaths and positive thoughts of how am I going to go positively into the day? That will help you without using your phone. You don't need your phone for that. But I've really appreciated the conversation on service, and I think that there's multiple levels, there's different perspectives on how we can approach where service to others, service to ourselves are the two main points. I think, I know there's 3 levels that I pointed out at the beginning, but those are the 2 main ones that will help us with the mission.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Charles?
Yeah, to answer Omar's question, I would add on it's really a question of discipline and willpower. It's very interesting to study success theory these days and how it's evolved over the course of certainly my career in the last several decades, and listen to Olympians, and many of them will often say, there's not much difference between them and another good athlete. The difference is the willpower, that when they wake up in the morning, they have the willpower to go and do that extra workout that's going to give them that extra edge on the track, or that extra push and that extra power in the pool, or whatever sport they're involved in. And it's that kind of willpower that is needed in the morning when you wake up to stay away from that addictive device. If you choose that that's what's needed. And I listen a lot to Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and he had a psychiatrist on recently, and Stephen Bartlett was all worried about mobile devices and addictive habits and things like that. And against the grand scheme of things, the psychiatrist was saying to him, well, let's have a look at your addictive habit compared to other addictive habits. And he said, okay, that's fine. So if you're checking your mobile device first thing in the morning, that's okay. Don't worry about that addiction. Worry about other things that you're committed to, and give yourself the freedom. But if you do want to have habits in the morning and you have that willpower, good things to do is, one, drink water in the morning, because the body gets dehydrated when it sleeps. Move around, because the brain always has a certain degree of sleep inertia when it first wakes up in the morning, and movement helps you get out of that. And the other thing is, get exposure to sunlight to help your circadian rhythm wake up right away. And if you just discipline yourself for the first 10-15 minutes of the day to do those things, and you have the willpower to do that, can often make a big difference. The other thing to add on to that would be written affirmations or written goals. Review your written goals and things like that. But I would conclude by saying, the secret to living is giving and being of service to others.
I couldn't agree more. And, I applaud you for your introduction to a person's daily habits that could improve their rest of the day. And that's what I do as much as I can. But, 2 miles within 15 minutes of waking up, it's automatic. And, I do all kinds of other nutritional things and everything, and it works. And that's the beauty of it. It does work. And if it continues to work, you want to continue to support it. To the cell phone question, I was thinking about, I feel like it's like a refrigerator, right? I go to refrigerator for specific things, I get them, and I close the door. I don't sit there and gaze into the refrigerator and pick everything up, try it out and see how it feels. And a phone is the same way. It's an instrument, it's a tool. I get what I need. I'm the smallest or the briefest texter you'll ever see. I'm always no, yes, okay. And if it's anything, let's talk about it, right? Because interpretation and all that stuff can get lost. And I'm not punctuating. I'm not worried about that. It's fast, it's easy, it's responsive. And so how do you cut down time in things that don't reward you or serve you? And then how do you redirect that time to things that better serve you? And it's all about understanding and appreciation. And how do you feel after you just did something, whatever that did was? Do you feel better for it or worse for it? And everything you do will either take you in the direction you need to go or take you away from the direction you're planning. So it's self-evaluation, reflection, and review that wins the day. And have fun with it, because you can always do yesterday tomorrow if today's new change doesn't work out too well, and rarely does that happen. So I know we're a little bit over, but it was very valuable. And when you got something that's so abundant and giving, you don't want to hold it to just the 1 hour. So we threw 4 more minutes of dessert in today. And share this with others. Share the link to it if you liked it. Come back. And we'd love to hear what you have to say, and introduce yourself to others after the show is over, and connect if it makes sense. So with that said, thank you, audience. Appreciate all of you. Come back in a week. We'll try to one-up today's. And with that said, have a beautiful day. It's whatever you want to make it. It's still got some hours left. Take care.